Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, wherever you may be, and whether you're watching live or archived. And welcome to episode number 72 of Nautel Transmission Talk Tuesday. I'm your host, Jeff Welton, and I have with me the handsome, the talented, the verbose and verbatim Mr. Christopher Tarr, the Ninjineer. Chris, welcome.
Well, thank you. Boy, that was very nice things to say. I don't know who you're talking about, but whoever this guy is, I'd love to meet him because he sounds really good.
There you go. There you go. Yeah, it's like I say. And so I was the guy that hit start today. Mr. Disembodied Voice Ed is in the background, I see, but he's been having some technical difficulties. So if this gets screwed up, don't blame Ed. It's all on me today. I'm not sure that's a good thing or a bad thing. On the plus side, I've got a new laptop that's actually capable of doing two things at once. So I'm going to call that a win. Fingers crossed. Um, Curtis already, and we'll hit the housekeeping thing in a moment, but Curtis has already said in the background, welcome back. I was running out of things to do over lunch. So I'm glad to know that we're at least providing some entertainment value. As I said, this is episode number 72. It's hard to believe. That's a lot of talking. And I mean, now for me, that's not a challenge. Chris, you're usually the strong silent type. So. But,
Yeah, right.
and speaking of
That's good.
webinars, a little plug there. You've been co-hosting This Week on Radio Tech for the last several months now.
Yeah, I was actually the original co-host as well, and then I took a break for a while, and then Kirk had asked me if I would come back, and there I am. So those are
Very
on
cool. Very cool.
Thursday afternoons.
Yeah, yeah. So definitely a little shout out for This Week in Radio Tech if you've got a little chance to listen. Let's see. I blew out Ed's housekeeping slide, so I'll hit the housekeeping part now and apologize for that mistake. See, this is what happens. You give me a month off on the road, I totally forget how to do this stuff. But so if you are an SBE member, Nautel webinar does qualify for half of a point on the recertification schedule. That reminds me, I am going to have to fill out my, so I'm in a quandary. I don't know if you ever hit this or not, Chris, but so my certification is up in January, so I've got to fill out the form. And it's at the big old, what, like 3-4 page form, something like that, where you fill out all the meetings you've been to. And of course, I keep terrible records. The
Oh yeah,
advantage I've got is I probably do a few more presentations than most, so I've got pretty good data on that.
sure.
But yeah, so anyway, the quandary becomes the certification comes up every 5 years, and it's like, okay, so I can renew my CBRE, or I can find a place to write the CSRE exam, and then I can skip the whole recertification form. So upgrading certification just to avoid doing the form.
Yeah. Well, I did. I think halfway through my renewal cycle, I went from CSRE to CPBE, and that
Mhm.
reset. So now I think it's 2025, I think is when I renew. And I just went through just as a matter of housekeeping and went through my recertification and I already have like 10 more points than I need to recertify. And I still got a couple years to go. So if you're
Yeah,
pretty active, and that was, and actually that's kind of the point with SBE with those recertification points, it's supposed to be easy to do.
right.
If you stay involved and engaged, that's the whole point, is to keep you involved and doing things. And if you do that, you find it's really easy to recertify.
Right. I mean, when I first got my certification back in 2018, I guess, wow, 'cause, I wrote my exam at one of Larry Wilkins' Alabama Broadcasters Academy engineering things. I happened to be presenting a course on grounding and just stayed for the whole thing and wrote the exam after, which was kind of cool. But I started really because I'd never been certified before. So I was rigorously keeping track. And within 6 months, I'd hit the requirement. And I said,
Yeah.
okay, well, I could throw this in the corner for a couple of years.
you know,
And
it's it's interesting talking about with writing the tests. I took the beta test for the what is it, the certified network. What is that? I'm looking at the thing right now.
oh,
Certified broadcast network engineer.
yes,
I took the beta test. I went and, but I didn't get any credit for it. So I had to take it twice. And I was like, well, that's not really fair. They're a little something my way for going through that.
right,
Um,
right. Half of the
but
points
yeah,
or whatever, something. But
right. I mean, come on, man, throw me a little bone here. But that was fun. That was fun.
Yeah. So other thing, we do make these as interactive as possible. If you look at your little control interface for GoToWebinar, you will see that you've got the ability to type in questions. They do pop up on my screen here, as with Curtis mentioning that he was running out of things to do at lunchtime. So certainly any questions, comments, we want to make this as interactive as possible. If you aren't shy and have a microphone, you should have a little hand wavy icon on your screen somewhere. I'm not seeing mine. Oh, because I've got the chat window open. But you can click on that and we should be able to unmute you and make you part of the conversation. Now, GoToWebinar likes to change stuff on me without any notice, so that may or may not still be the case, but we'll get her done. On that note, we did have some advanced questions, and these we'll try to hit as we go along, some of them directly, some of them indirectly. The stuff that's directly, like for example, question number 1, talking about a transmitter purchase that's showing different codes. None of our transmitters use codes exactly. They do specific alarms. So, I mean, best thing, if something isn't working the way you think it should be working, reach out to support, and they'll be happy to help. We've got toll-free number, 24/7 support, and those guys just love, or email support@nautel.com. But so this is kind of the where we're going. I am going to, usually I keep these anonymous. Second one from the bottom, that's Pierre Lone Wolf in Kotzebue, Alaska, where he's the one at the replacement stage. I'm not sure how we recycle old engineers, Pierre. And I was always told that old engineers don't go away. They just kind of fade into the background, into the noise floor, if you will.
Out into the ether.
Out into the ether. So anyway, these are the things we'll talk about as we go. One of the big questions is always, and so to give you the background on this, and this is where I give Chris a little bit of a plug. Originally, I'd asked him and his group owner, Dave Magnum, to participate. And Dave's response really set me, I guess didn't sit me on my heels, but it really made me think about the importance of making an engineering part of the management team. Because Dave said, look, Chris and I work so closely together on all this stuff. We're partners. He's not an employee of mine. And he said, he can speak for me. And that just blew me away. So, you know, but that is critical. And that's something you've done in several different positions over the years I've known you, is kind of made yourself part of the management team.
Yeah, and you really need to. It's really hard to, not only do your job, but to help the ownership or the management do their job. I mean, the bottom line financially is as important to me as anybody. And a lot of times we tend to get into these silos. And well, I don't care about ad sales or employees or anything else. I care about keeping things on the air. That's my job. And it's gone as far with Magnum where I'll stand in. We'll buy a group or whatever, and I'll stand in as the manager sitting in the general manager's office, for a couple of days while we're doing the transition. So a lot of times, it's just a matter of, it's how you present yourself as well. I try to get ahead of where we're going and ask the right questions. So for example, we were all having dinner one night and they started talking about, sports, high school sports, we're doing this with a cell phone or whatever. And boy, it'd be great to, have some quality audio there. And I said, you know what? There's a lot of ways we could do this. Let me do some research and find out what makes sense. So, it becomes that matter of trust and that matter of, they can see that I value the partnership. And although, I always tell people, I joke that I'm probably one of the highest levels in the company whose last name isn't Magnum. It really is, I work very closely with them and it's not their company, it's our company. And I treat it the same way I would treat mine. And that's almost a demand of Dave is, I was saying earlier, I'll say, well, it's your money. You want to spend, and he, no, it's not my money. It's our money and it's our group. And, these are your radio stations. And So, you kind of have to treat it that way. And after a while, what happens is you develop that relationship where it's really a partnership and not a, here he is, here I am, here's, whatever. It's very, becomes very flat. And he and I, as he mentioned, we'll talk several times a day, about, things, the stations we have or the stations we may get, or, just even technology. He's really interested and engaged in engineering. So, he'll find something interesting, online or something and call me and go, "Hey, Doc, what's your opinion on this?" So it makes it a lot of fun.
Yeah, and that's I think a really big deal. I mean, if you've got that level of passion and involvement, it definitely it helps invest everybody. And I mean, I told somebody once, I said, everybody's got to realize that if the transmitter's on the air, we're not making any money. And it's like, yeah, well, if the sales guys aren't selling anything, you're not making any money. If traffic's not billing, you're not making any money. If it's not just any one. So yeah, like to say that that team effort, and I mean that can get lost pretty easily. As like you say, we all tend to sort of you see things from the view of your own challenges, I
Well, and,
guess.
and I think a lot of times we misunderstand really what our position is. I like to think that our job isn't to fix things or to take care of technology. I mean, it's part of it, but really our job is to use technology to help others accomplish their goals. So for example, when a program director comes in and says, "Oh, I want to do this and this and this," the response isn't, "We can't do it." The response is, "Okay, what is it you're trying to do? Let's find a way to make that work."
Right.
Same thing with account executives, and we'll go into some of the things I've done with our group since I've taken over. But same thing. It's
Mhm.
you they may come to you with a printer issue and you're like, "Oh, not again," but it's one of their biggest issues. And if they're not being able to do that, they're not out there making us revenue. So
Right.
really our job is to use technology to make their lives easier. And
Yeah.
fixing technology is part of that for sure. But there's very much a human element sometimes that we forget.
Right. And I mean, an example, I butt heads with the IT guys a lot because, of course, I grew up in the company when and I tell this story ad nauseum, but, our original network was two 80,000 series or 800 series PCs connected running Lantastic over a coax, and that was the whole network. And so it's evolved over the years. And as we've gotten bigger and done more things that require higher levels of security, the IT manager will kind of, and I'll look at it and say, why are you restricting me? And well, he's not restricting me. He's trying to make his job possible. Not even that he's trying to make it easier. He's just trying to make it possible, because we get hit with umpteen different spam and DDoS taps a day. So yeah, and once I started shifting gears from, and I mean, it may be a little different because I'm out here preaching IT security every darn day, except the whole practice what you preach thing is sometimes a little harder. And once I started looking at it from his perspective, it's, oh yeah, okay, I understand why you want to do this.
Yeah, and I think too, it helps if first of all, you assume positive intent with everybody around you, that they're not trying to restrict you; they're trying to, in a way, help.
Yeah,
So I think that's number one, and I think number two is to kind of, again, we tend to put ourselves in these, engineering is, we're the worst at this. We put ourselves in these little silos, and that's excuse me, that's where we live, and we don't tend to not take a look at things globally. And that's where a lot of times we make our mistake is,
yeah,
if we're the guy in the corner, with the soldering iron that is never seen, that's how we're treated. If we come out and we become a partner and work together, that's how we get things done. And
yeah.
and that's kind of a good dovetail into what you're getting at here with repair or replace.
Right, exactly. And that's where I was going with it. And one of the things I've sort of started doing, and of course, I'm in sales now, but sales is just another method of providing solutions. So I've told guys a lot of times I'll be talking to somebody and it's like, look, it's not really any of my business, but if you could help me understand why you want to do what you want to do, then that may help me provide you with a better solution for it. And
Well,
Joseph made a good comment in the questions that the transmitters are just the handle to the crank of the money machine.
I love
So,
it. I love that.
and that's a great way of putting it, because there are a lot of moving parts that have to go together.
Well, and that really goes into my next part of this discussion here, which is I'm very fortunate to work with a group and with a group of people who, this is a very, by nature, a very forward-looking group. The person I work with, Dave, who owns the group, his son is now the general manager of the stations. He went to college and got a business degree and also loves radio. He's going to someday hand that off to his son, and so on and so on. And so, we're not looking to get these stations on the air to turn around and flip them.
Hmm.
Dave's not a seller; he's a buyer. We're in
Right.
still, the past 2 years, we've bought 6 or 7 radio stations. So, we're in this for the long haul. So when we make these decisions, we make them knowing that it's not a matter of trying to just stay on the air. It's a matter of investing, because these things are going to be around for a long, long time in the family.
Right.
So, but on the same token, there is the reality of small market radio. Um, right now, especially, nobody's setting the world on fire. So, we really have to be smart in how we use our money in
Hmm.
terms of capital improvement. We know that tube type transmitters are getting harder and harder to maintain, and tubes are getting harder to find. And I'm very blessed that I've got one of the best tube transmitter guys on our team.
Oh,
He can
John.
make these, John Zeckerly, yeah, he can make these things run just by looking at them.
Yeah.
So that's good, but he's not going to be around forever either. So um, we're starting to slowly look at how we're replacing these things, and we've done a combination of new transmitters and used ones. And now in the past little over a year, I've bought 6 transmitters,
Hmm.
3 of which have been new. Uh, then the other 3 have been decent used solid state transmitters that we go actively seek. And in fact, there are times where they come up and we're not really looking to buy one, but hey, if we got a good deal on it, let's do that and replace one of our tube transmitters.
Right.
So, we've kind of been on that tear of, we would love to buy all new transmitters. That's not practical,
Right.
just, with 25 radio stations, it's just never going to happen. So, we take care of the ones that we have that are tube based. There are certain situations. We bought the new radio station in Fort Atkinson and one in Eau Claire that are big signals for us. Those got new transmitters. Those are going to be doing HD and some other things. So in those situations, that made sense. Those are going to be a big investment for us. But then there's, we came across one. I think you know the story about a transmitter that came up for sale in Nevada that was
Yeah.
on the exact same frequency of one of our stations here in Wisconsin, and it was an older Nautel that is not really frequency agile, but it
Right.
was on this frequency. We got it for like $5,000. That was
Yeah.
a run.
And I
And so,
mean, I know that model. It's
yeah,
a solid box.
right.
So,
So, it's newer than the tube type we had. It's not a new one, but it's certainly, we've not had a single peep from it in over a year now.
right.
So that's where, repair, replace, or upgrade. Um, you always want to keep moving, and you don't want to have things falling apart. Our criteria is basically, is it going to help our reliability, and is it going to
Hmm.
improve the experience of the listeners and the advertisers?
Right.
So, being on the air is a big one. We just invested in a bunch of new hardware for streaming, because again, if the streams sound bad, that's a bad experience.
Hmm.
We just did some upgrades for our sporting events, because again, we have advertising partners and fans of the games that listen. So,
Right.
that's, there's a lot of math that goes into that, but it's not to say just go out and buy all new stuff or repair everything you've got, because that's also not practical. The price
Right.
of doing these repairs is going up, and there
No.
has to be a line where you go, what's my time worth?
Right. And I mean, my line, I guess the catchphrase that I use for almost everything is it's situational. And whether it's one piece of a station, whether it's an equipment upgrade for a station, whether you're looking at the whole fleet or all the stations, what you do, a lot of it will be determined by stuff like that. And then you'll get situations like this. And credit to Andy Lowe over in Michigan. He is going to get so tired of me using this picture. But he was doing a studio upgrade and went and took a look at the electrical and started to trace it back and discovered that everything was running off one 15 amp plug in the wall. And this is what was wired to that one 15 amp plug in the wall. So
Nice.
sometimes, yeah, sometimes you do have to rip it all out and start from scratch. And
And
other
and
times, go ahead.
we just recently did that actually a week ago at our Fort Atkinson station where we had planned on doing it, and then something came up, and we're like, well, we're here, let's just do it. And rip, I like to call it ripping the Band-Aid off. We ripped the Band-Aid off and cleaned it all up. And sometimes you have to do that. And again, it's that whole, it's our job to be able to come up with creative ways to do that. Because I'm not out to spend a ton of money. I mean, as my coworker Dave likes to say, it's our money. It's not his money. It's not, he's not in this to make a ton of money. He's in it because he loves radio, and the money belongs to all of us. And so, I'm not out to spend a lot of our money, but on the other hand, I understand that audio quality is a big, big thing for us. We really want to have some of the best sounding radio stations on the dial. So by nature, that means a lot of times ripping studios apart after we buy them and doing some audio over IP. But again, when those deals come up, I had an opportunity to pick up some Axia gear, uh, that was in relatively good shape for a really good price. And I called Dave. I said, hey, Dave, I'm not sure where these are going to go yet, but we've been rolling these out, and this opportunity came up. And he's like, get it. So, do what you need to do to get your hands on those, and we'll figure out what to do with them later.
Right.
And that certainly beats, the next time I'm going to do a studio, because we know that we're going to do Axia in all of our studios in one form or another. And a great example now is we bought this facility in Eau Claire, and now we already have the Axia gear that we're going to need on the shelf to make this work. So we're not having to pay full price to upgrade this studio to do the Axia things that we wanted to do.
Right.
Yeah, another example is I'm going to be driving out to Kansas in a couple of weeks. We found a station that was selling a newer vintage BE solid state transmitter.
Mm-hmm.
For a great deal, along with an antenna that's on the same frequency as one of our other stations. So great.
Those are the kind of things that are just so cool to find.
Oh yeah. So yeah, I'll hop in a U-Haul and drive to Kansas and pick it up. And again, we're getting that technology upgrade. We're not paying a lot of money for it. And it's certainly in that situation, the price we paid for that is, way less than what we're going to pay to keep some of these other transmitters maintained.
Right. Martin has asked in the questions, might either of us have a list of used broadcast equipment vendors? And obviously, I'm in the business of selling new broadcast equipment, so I tend not to. But having said that, I mean, I know like Bone Broadcast does a lot of used stuff. BOHN Broadcast. Josh typically has a
Mhm.
bunch of stuff in the warehouse. Martin Cooper, Transcom in Pennsylvania, does a fair bit of used stuff. A lot of the resources that you'll see when we hit the end of this short slide deck will show you some places where, and like, well, your group, the Virtual Engineer, there's a buy and sell page on it.
Yeah. I
So,
also, the past two, I think I was the BDR.net, Barry Michigan site,
yep, and that'll
as
be
a
linked in
classifieds there.
the end too.
Yeah.
So yeah, we'll hit that as well. One of the big things too is, and this is something I know this is near and dear to your heart, but we talk about fix versus repair, but when you get right down to it, a lot of times maintenance will avoid the repair or the replacement decision. And that's something
Absolutely.
we need to do a little more of.
Oh, absolutely. And it was something that, quite frankly, wasn't really brought up. A little history about the group. It was a fairly small group up until a few years ago. And Dave and I have known each other for years, and they didn't really have a director of engineering position. They were all kind of individual islands run their own way. And, he realized that that wasn't really sustainable as he grew. So, I came in to develop these standards and these procedures and things. And one of the first things I did was do maintenance contracts, or, our friend Chris to do come visit and service generators and things like that. And now we have a maintenance plan for those things, whether it's I do it or one of our other coworkers does it, or I hire somebody to do it. No matter what, all of our HVAC units and generators are checked twice a year, because again, first of all, they're going to fail when you need them, always. And when they do fail in that situation, usually it's a lot more expensive to fix than it is
Yeah.
to say, okay, we're going to need to buy this, take the time to find a good deal. There's my handyman, his name is Chris, Jeff knows him as well, a good friend of mine, and he's very good. He's a MacGyver. He likes to brag about that, but he's very
Hmm.
good at finding excellent deals for solutions for these if he has time. Now, if I said I have to get this thing on immediately, he's going to buy whatever he can to get that done. But if I
Yeah.
say, yeah, this generator's having some issues, I need to get it fixed here the next week or two, he'll take a look at it and go, hey, the manufacturer wants $300 for this, but I know a place where I can get it for 100. And,
Yeah.
so he'll go and do that. But it's always more, and I know that a lot of times managers will go, oh, that's, we're paying somebody to come out and look at something that's not broken. And, that's always kind of the pushback. But I'll tell you what, I mean, I'd much rather have it fixed on our time than on its time.
Well, and what do they say? If you don't find time for the transmitter will schedule it. And
Yeah.
the guarantee its schedule will be not the one you choose. Typically, morning drive on the Friday of a long weekend.
Well, and
But
then even things like I was reaching over for this. These are posted. I won't go too in depth on this, but these are posted on the inside of the doors of all of our transmitter sites, and it says things like sweep the floor, change the air filters, test the generator, check the fuel, check the phone line, make sure the fans in the exciter are clean. Lights are off, the AC is set. You've informed me of anything that needs to be ordered. And this is posted. There we go, that's posted on the inside of all of our transmitter buildings, so that anybody who goes to that building will see that before they leave, and they know they need to go through all of those different things. And that's all preventative stuff.
right.
Check for weeds, check for leaks, check for, all of you, put your hand on the transmission line. Is it hot? That kind of
Hmm.
thing. And if there is a problem, immediately let me know. And we
Yeah.
have a logbook that you have to sign that says you did it. Because again, if you can catch that stuff early and fix it, it's going to save you a lot of hassle and money down the road.
And that's a really good point, and it kind of ties into where I'm going next. When you do get to have to where you have to fix it, and there'll be times where, especially these days with 20-week lead times on new gear, and I do sessions on exactly why it's so critical that we do the maintenance these days. But eventually something's going to break. And then you've got to, and this is for what it's worth, a little side note too. If anybody, any SBE members out there, especially the Member Plus, Dan, I have a brain fart in his last name. I could go check my email, but we're doing a multi-part session on troubleshooting techniques, and it's more talking about not any specific problem or how to troubleshoot it, but he builds scenarios and talks about ways that you could go about working through the troubleshooting process. And this is like the slide that I use in a troubleshooting session that I show. Just those are your three choices when you're troubleshooting something. You look at the end, you look at the beginning, or you look at the middle. And then from there you determine where you go. But
I always like to say you start with, what's not working, and then go back and start with what is working and go from there. Okay, where
yeah,
does it stop working?
that's it.
And
And
I
that's what
love
I always,
troubleshooting. It's just there's some
yeah,
zen to that.
right. And I say definitely there's I guess a judgment call, and we had a couple of comments in the advanced questions about power supplies. One talking about what do you do when you've got really noisy AC supply, which is obviously, I mean, yeah, you're going to And that comes into the whole maintenance question, whether it's AC supplies, whether it's environment from air handling or being out in a cornfield with forced air. A lot of times you do have to configure the site to work with your environment too.
Absolutely. And that's where, we'll look at where this equipment's going to live, and that'll determine, things like, HVAC, how do we harden if we need to harden the AC out there and things like that. And you started to kind of touch on this too. You get to a point where you have to determine, okay, I've gone through the troubleshooting tips. I could go way down this rabbit hole or move on. And that's an important distinction to make. And excuse me, not always an easy one, because a lot of us get into that zone. It's like, okay, I'm gonna figure this out. I'm gonna figure this out. But then it becomes, and especially in my position, where it becomes a time sink, and you have to go, okay, I have to just admit defeat on this one and move on. Either find somebody who actually can do it, or just go, okay, it's time to replace. And that
Right.
also is a big part of that decision. Is if it's just a power supply or something, yeah, I'll order a new one, off DigiKey or whatever, and replace it and call it good. I'm also very fortunate, and I believe Chuck as well, Chuck Gennaro,
Oh
um,
yeah.
who is just a great bench guy. And so a lot of times I'll just send it off to him if I can't do it. And if I can't do it, he usually can. But again,
Right.
that's where that financially can, I'm not going to have him work on a $200 piece of equipment because it'll cost that much to repair it. He's very
Right.
honest about that. But if it's $1,000 piece of gear, yeah, I'll spend $200 to send it out and get it rebuilt.
Well, sure.
um I mean, it just, and that's where those decisions need to be made. And again, whether and that's also the decision on whether I do it or I have it done.
Yeah.
If I'm looking at this going, okay, I'm going to spend 2 days on this, well, that's costs our group a lot of money to have me tied up for that long.
Right.
So then I have to make the decision of, do I hand that off? Do I, or in some cases that even decides whether or not I'm going to replace it. If it's something critical and I'm going to spend 2 or 3 days trying to figure this out, a lot of times the math works out to just replacing it.
Right. And that's one of the things that I tell folks. I mean, it's not just the value of your time, what you make divided by the number of hours you work to determine that, but you've got to look at the station itself. What's this station bill per hour, per minute? What's it costing us to be off air or be impaired by whatever this failure is? And so, maybe sometimes you end up taking a station that doesn't bill very much and cripple it to solve the high billing station,
And and
rob Peter to pay Paul, so to speak.
and surprisingly, I guess maybe not surprisingly, but nicely enough, Dave is actually very good with that. If we'll have a translator somewhere that's off the air, he'll go, don't go out in the middle of the night to try to get it on the air. It's important to us, but it's not going to break us if it's off the air for 6 hours or 10 hours or whatever.
Right.
um, or even things like, well, if that adapter is at this translator or something and you need it somewhere else, go ahead and grab it. This can be off for a day. It's not going to break us.
Yeah.
Um, he's very realistic about that. But yes, there is also that whole hierarchy of, okay, I've got
Hmm.
stations that I absolutely, no matter what, have to keep on. And then it goes down from there. And then we've got, smaller stations. In an ideal world, everything would be on the air. And I would
Yeah.
love to keep everything going. And 99% of the time, I mean, now that I've implemented a lot of these maintenance items, it's been a long time since we've had any kind of major off air issue.
Hmm.
Uh, but you know, if somebody's going to be off the air, we want it to be, you know, one of those very low tier stations and
Right.
not big ones. So that's also with repairing and replacing. A lot of times I'll buy something, new and big and whatever for one of our big stations, and then what they had gets filtered down the line.
Right.
Because oftentimes they'll have nicer, they may not be new, but nicer used gear than what the next station down has.
Sure.
Um, so as long as it's worth doing, um, I'll do that. Now, if it's something that's,
Charge
really old
beyond
and doesn't,
recognition or
yeah,
really old. Yeah.
okay, it goes away. We'll throw it in storage or whatever and eventually sell it.
Yeah.
But there's a great example of that is audio processors.
Hmm.
Dave and I are very big fans of really good audio. So, our big stations, we have Omnia 12s and some other, or Omnia 11s rather, and some other gear. Um, but we also want our small stations to sound really good too. So we spend a little extra money on audio processors. Now, we may not buy an Omnia 11, but there are a couple of older models where if you buy a box or two with it, are just as competitive. And,
Yeah,
you can save some money doing that. And that's also that hierarchy of what's important to us.
yeah.
Um, Good audio is really important to us. So we'll
That's a
spend extra money there.
yeah, little shout out there. I saw the post that Catfish Michael Dosh made about the new toy Angry Audio's got out.
Yeah,
So
yeah,
little
and
compeller looking thing.
yeah, and that's he and I had a conversation about that, and I've tried it out, and it sounds great. And with that device, which is going to be pretty affordable, you can actually add new life to an older processor. So there's no reason to run out and buy a new one if you can take this box, add it on there, and hot rod what you've got.
Yeah,
And
and
so
that
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 we do
comes
that a lot.
to and that comes to another thing in the repair replace column. Sometimes upgrade is an option. I mean, if you've got an older tube rig and you've got a stock of tubes, or you've got a dud in the library at a Conco, then you've got some options there, and you swap out the exciter and IPA with a newer low power transmitter to
Yeah, we did.
again breathing new life, so to speak.
Yeah, we had actually a really old transmitter, but a really nice one at one of our stations. It's a BE FM30A, which is the really
Mhm.
old Blueface model. But we got it from WLS FM in Chicago, so it had lived its entire life at the Sears Tower, and it just really well maintained. So it has a
Mhm.
lot of life left in it, except for it had the strange IPA issue. So what did we do? I bought a BE 250-watt exciter, and that
Mhm.
became the exciter in the IPA. That transmitter has run for a couple of years now without a single issue. But that was a relatively inexpensive. In fact, I bought that used and had Chuck completely refurb it and put that on the air. And I mean, for what we paid for all of that, it's still way less than I would have
Right.
paid for, even just a decent used transmitter somewhere else. We had to put a little
Mhm.
work into it, but totally worth it. And we do that
Right.
now. As these new solid state transmitters come in, we look at the transmitters we have that they're getting replaced with and going, would that make a good backup somewhere? Or another thing we're doing now is we're really high on building auxiliary sites for our FMs. So can we
Mhm.
use that in an auxiliary site and use some of that old equipment that we have for that?
Right.
Um, I've told the story before with La Crosse where, we have transmitters on both sides of the Mississippi River, and the power will go off on one side, but not the other. So I built auxiliary sites for the stations and flipped them so that the auxiliary sites are on the other sides of the river.
Yeah.
That was done with stuff we had on hand. That maybe cost us $2,000-3,000. It's already saved
Mhm.
us many times when the main transmitter's been off and we had we had to go on and stay on the air. So
Right.
we're even looking at it from that respect of antennas that we take down, equipment that we retire. We don't really throw a lot of that out. We store it because these opportunities come up and we go, okay, here's an inexpensive way to really give us some bang for the buck. And
Mhm.
so that, as well is where some of this can come in.
Yeah. Ray in the troubleshooting mentions most troubleshooting nowadays is Ethernet ports that go and eventually come back online, often never able to find out why, and usually have redundant links, et cetera. And so there's one thing when you got redundant links, of course, sometimes they'll switch and things will drop out and things can get a little snaky depending on the link management. But the other thing, like tools for that, I mean, like on my home network, I run Passler's PRTG. So anytime anybody in the house comes and says, I can't get on the internet, I mean, I can go on to PRETG with their IP address and just search it and tell you exactly, or I'll get an email report every time something changes on the network, or whatever. But there are umpteen different ways to monitor it. And it's something we need to do more as we get more IP oriented.
I use SNMP for everything, and I can monitor. you name it, I can monitor it. But you also made a good point about backups, and backups don't have to be expensive. Redundancy doesn't have to be expensive.
Right.
As part of this upgrading our audio quality, I wanted to do an uncompressed audio link from our studio to our transmitter site. So I ended up putting up Ubiquity air fiber radios and buying, and again, this is where you want to spend the money. I bought
Mhm.
Gates Air IP Link boxes, which are some of the best redundant codecs that out there. They do
Yep.
uncompressed. They can have several channels. I'm not going to use a barracks box for this.
Right.
So I bought a set of those, and then I just kept the original STLs as a backup.
Hmm.
So a couple of dollars in some switching gear, and in fact, I don't even need to do that because I'm using an Omni 11, and it can fail from digital to analog.
Right.
So I now have a redundant link, and in the end, better quality audio, and because of the air fiber, I've got the SNMP monitoring there and everything else. So it wasn't just spending that money on audio; it really enhanced a lot of things.
Yeah.
Um, so that's another way to look at it too. Is this part of something bigger that I can work into? And
Right.
that's kind of what we're doing now. I have a master Burke unit at one of our sites, and I use SNMP to monitor all of our other sites. So now,
Mhm.
as a matter of just standard procedure, I get IP connectivity at each tower site. Um, Now, normally you'd look at that, especially in these smaller stations, and go, that's really kind of pricey for a small station like that. But when you look at what that brings,
Mhm.
and for the entire group, when you can look globally like that, it makes a lot more sense. I can put backups out there. I can do, several different audio paths. I can stream if I have to
Right.
get audio out to that site. So it's in the grand scheme of things, not only is it inexpensive insurance, but I save on remote controls because everything is IP based now through
Hmm.
SNMP. I'm not having to buy a remote control for each transmitter site. I may have to buy a Burke Plus X adapter or something for $1,000, but that all ties into the master remote system, which we've already purchased. So it pays for itself pretty quickly. So
The
that
other
that's
advantage,
the other thing you got to look.
and one of the things I get on with our AUI, which we won't get into a whole lot at the moment, but just having some level of commonality too. When
Mhm.
you're using the same system everywhere, you don't have even that brief little mental hiccup where you set your mindset to working on this gear versus that gear, because it's always the same.
Well, and that leads me to another project that we spent some money on that really paid itself back right away. It doesn't really go along with repair or replace, but just kind of since we're on that topic,
Mhm.
I created a VPN WAN for all of our locations,
Mhm.
transmitter sites, studios, everything, and the commonality there is the IP addressing scheme. So you know that an address ending in 50, no matter what the prefix is for any of our markets, will take you to the EAS unit.
Right.
10 will always take you to the transmitter.
Mhm.
So, when you've got 25 plus radio stations, it can be hard to remember what's what. So as part of putting all of this together, all of that's the same. And not only that, but then with the common remote control, I can log into one page and see all of our sites
Right.
and see what's going on. So that again goes back to saving time, saving money, saving effort. And the cost of doing that, even though it was expensive to buy the Burke gear and all this other stuff, is still less than if you priced out a remote control for each transmitter site. So
Right.
there was more money up front, but we saved money on the back end.
And that kind of comes back to in the whole repair versus replace discussion, and we'll get into some cost of operation versus cost of ownership in a couple of seconds. But there's what I call the intangibles, the pain points. I mean, the if this takes me extra time every time I do it, and I do it 100 times a month, then that's value. There's a value to avoiding that. A side note, Casey asked if anybody knows a good source for used or new BE transmitter power supplies. I'd love to know. not into the BE parts business so much, but if anybody does know that, they had sent one out for repair and FedEx lost it. So anybody does know, feel free to ping me and I'll be happy to pass that along.
I wish I
Um,
knew. There was Magnetronics, I think, used to be your magnetics.
Pioneer
Pioneer,
Pioneer
but they don't do that
Magnetics. Yeah.
anymore. Yeah.
No.
Well,
A side note though, this is where I do put a plug in for anybody who's got one of our NV series transmitters or the later V series with the Tektronix CUI power supplies. We do now have a repair facility in the northeastern US.
woo!
Call our yay woo. So call our support guys or reach out support@nautel.com and let them know what transmitter it's for and how many you want. They will want serial numbers because there are some that cannot be repaired, but you get them the serial numbers and model numbers. Usually just take a picture of the serial number label off the supply and send it to support@nautel.com. They'll get you an RMA number and provide you with an address, and they'll manage the whole thing for you and get her done.
Oh,
So that's
fantastic.
something that has been a long time coming, and credit not just because he's online right now, but shout out to our head of support, John Wilton, for spearheading that, because I know he was sweating bullets, and us sales guys probably gave him a harder time about that than we really should have some days. So yeah, that's another cool thing. All right, moving forward. Speaking of power supplies, when you're doing your maintenance runs, sometimes it's a good idea to do a quick thermal scan of everything. And on a rare occasion, if you can find something that's getting hot before it burns down, that's typically, again, it's a whole lot better not to burn it up than to have to replace it.
Yeah, and even if you don't have one of those fancy flare guns, just a one of
Mhm.
those what they call it, the handheld thermostat guns.
Right, right. Yeah, I know the ones you
Yeah,
mean,
yeah.
but
But even just running that along your wiring and just see if there's any hot spots. That also helps with AM directionals to find things that are failing.
yeah,
Those sorts of things. So, that's a great tip.
yeah. And I mean, even if you don't have any tools at all, just the back of the hand down the front of the breaker panel. And I mean, you'll notice if you hit something that's really, really hot. And they always say back of the hand because if for some weird reason you decide to do it with the cover off and hit something that's really, really live, then your hand's going to tend to go away instead of the other way. But yeah, don't measure stuff with your hand when it's not covered, please. That's
Good tip.
today's safety tip. All right, so I think you can get something like this from pretty much any manufacturer. This particular one, if you go to nautel.com and in the little search bar at the top, type in I think cost comparison or cost of operation, it will give you links to something that looks very similar to this. And again, back to the repair replace, there are a lot of times you look at parts plus electrical, and even on FM now, we're the FM transmitters to solid state are getting efficient enough. Like you look here as an example, I mean, 6 years you could cover the power costs over an Eco 10 at 11.5 cents a kilowatt hour. So that's just one example, and I know that you do this on a daily basis with much more than just one transmitter.
Well, and not only is there the tangible savings, but there's the intangible about how many times is the Ego 10 going to go off the air, compared to a solid state transmitter that even when there is a failure, generally they'll stay on at some power level.
Right. And I mean, and again, the whole, and you and I had this discussion several years ago in another career ago when you were doing a lot of contract engineering, where I'd given you a call about a station that had been off, and you said, "No, I know about it. He's going to be off for a few days because there's nobody available to fix them." And
Right, right.
when you get to the older boxes, that's becoming a bigger challenge.
Exactly. And we were just talking about earlier about John Zeckerly. I mean, if one of these goes down, the ones that we have go down and John's not available, it's a tough night because I got to try to fix it and I'm not nearly as good as he is at it. So,
Right.
we're off the air for a little while and, I'm hours away. So, those are factors as well as just the bottom line that have to go into these decisions.
Yeah, exactly. And let's see, O'Brien mentioned that the reason for using the back of your hand was less about getting electrocuted and more because the back of your hand tends to be more sensitive to heat than the palm of your hand, which does make sense when you think about it, unless you're an office guy that has no calluses at all built up. In which case, yeah, that's I used to work for a living, now I don't, but here you go. Now, the other big thing is you don't know if you don't know where you're spending money, you don't know where to save money. And this is one of those. I've shown an energy monitor for the purpose of energy audits, but I know you've and I have talked years about doing like phone line audits and what wire lines are we paying for that we haven't used?
Absolutely. And there are all kinds of ways that you can look at, just in general healthy, how much money are you spending on it? Go to your sites. How many things are plugged in that you don't need? If you have your modulation monitor running all the time and you go visit the site once a month, why? Why are you spending the money to leave that plugged in? Phone audits are great. Those are situations where, you know, whenever anybody inherits a radio station, there's always phone lines and things that were ordered that never canceled. And, you can save. I saved when I was with Intercom. I found one and we ended up saving $12,000 a year in telco costs.
Hmm.
And then there's even just things like, does moving to voice over IP make sense? Does consolidating some of our internet provider services make sense? I have a vendor that I use who does a really good job where I say I want to have connectivity put in here, and she'll go and find the best deal and handle the installation and everything else. Her name's Kristen. She's great, but I know that she does all the shopping. She basically gets a cut from the provider when we sign that agreement. She gets a little spiff out of that, but
Hmm.
it's her job to find the absolute best deal for me and then walk through the steps of getting it installed. So there are all these different things with saving energy. We literally have a handbook on that where we have a certain temperature that our buildings are at, um, you know procedures for closing shades. And again, it sounds like you're being cheap until you look at the bigger picture. All of those little things can add up to a whole lot of money, and they're just simple things.
Right. And I mean, it's again, it's one of the examples I use, and I do it more for reliability. I mean, some of the bigger boxes got the touch screens on them, and the touch screens do have a timeout and they do go black, but the backlight's still on. And well, what's the only thing that ever fails on a touchscreen? Usually the backlight, but there's a power switch. So switch the power off on the touchscreen before you leave the
I
site.
on my Nautels, I always do that. I open it up, and in fact, you've met Cliff Groth, I'm sure.
I
Um,
have.
he's a WBA Hall of Fame engineer. He works with us, and but he's a tube guy. He's retired and just does some stuff on the side. And he was driving him nuts because he kept touching the screen and couldn't figure out why it wouldn't turn on. And I explained to him that you got to reach around open the door and turn the monitor on because I shut it off when I leave. And so now,
Yeah, yeah.
he makes a habit of doing that every time. But that's a great example of, it takes 2 seconds to do and, will really extend the life of that monitor.
Yeah. Now, I've got a couple of people have commented in the questions that they're not finding the cost of operation comparison that I put up. Let me flick back to that slide. So apparently that's broken now. I know Ed's listening, so Ed, take note and reach out to Matt and say, "Hey, this is broken. Fix it," and we'll get it back up for y'all. But there you go. See, we break stuff too, sometimes more often than not. So when you get right down to it, like I say, the repair or the replace, it isn't going to be a cut and dried answer. It'll be different, and I mean even within a group from one station to the next. But whether your contract, whether your salary will make the decision, what's the pain point? Is there what's your, I guess, top level guidance on how you make that decision? I mean, typically you're going to involve more than just you unilaterally saying we should buy a new one, right?
Absolutely. And I think, that's where we can do our best work as educators. Um, when I go to Dave to try, to say I think we need to get something. I I very clearly explain why, why repair versus replace. And I know that he'll ask those questions, so I come prepared with that. But if we can upfront very clearly articulate what it is that we're wanting to do. So for example, if I thought we needed to buy a new transmitter, I would say, here's the situation. This transmitter is dying. Here are some of the things it's doing. Here's what it's going to cost to repair. Um, here's what it costs to replace. And the more you can educate them and answer those questions, the easier it is going to be to make that decision. As Dave likes to say, explain it to me. Explain it to
Right.
me. Help me understand it. I mean, we
Yeah.
went as far as yesterday, and this sounds goofy, but it's just the way we run things. Talking about taking a U-Haul out to Kansas to get this transmitter. Would it be cheaper to drive a car first one way, then rent a truck and come back? We went down, we actually sat down, figured out the mileage, and realized that by just doing a U-Haul round trip, we saved $300.
Yep.
So,
Oh yeah.
it's those sorts of things, and it does fall on us as the engineers to not just say, hey, we got to replace this,
Hmm.
because after a while, that's all they hear is, and
Right.
you're always just wanting to replace things. And
Well,
sometimes I get called out. I'll say,
mhm.
oh, I think we can fix this, and Dave will be like, why aren't we replacing this? Well, because I wanted to save a little money. And it's like, well, we're already throwing good money after bad on this. It's just time to cut it and replace it.
Right.
So, that all factors into this. And again, I think the easiest way, the most painless way to help make those decisions is to involve management in that and
Hmm.
just articulate exactly what the situation is and understand that they need to understand it, because what you're talking about is all foreign to them. And if you
Yep.
can say in real terms, this transmitter has been off the air 4 times last week. I've called the repair place. The parts are going to be this much money if we can get them. If we fix it and we can get the parts and everything else, in 6 months it could do it again. And so, I always like to say, we're already halfway to buying a new transmitter at that point. And
Right.
then they open their eyes and go, oh, wow, okay.
Yeah, and I mean the other aspect is you use the. And by the way, but just going to throw the little side note in here. We're hitting the top of the hour, but we've never finished one of these on time. I don't see any reason to start today. This will be archived. If anybody does have a hard stop and has to drop out, I want to give you the quick thank you now, but we'll carry on. But it's funny you'd mentioned the U-Haul, and I got firsthand experience with that because when I met my wife, she was living in Red Wing, Minnesota. Then, of course, I'm out here on the ocean in Eastern Canada in Nova Scotia. And so when we decided that she was moving here to rent a U-Haul in Red Wing and drag it 1,700 miles to Halifax was $1,500 more than renting the U-Haul in Halifax for a week and driving it in a 3,500-mile circle.
Right.
So,
And, and it's
you
funny
know,
because that's where Dave and I have, go back and forth, because, I'll say I'll say, well, it's the, round trip. Well, I can't believe that's the case. No, it is. And I go get the details and he'll go, okay, you've done your research,
yep, yep,
and we kind of play devil's advocate back and forth. But the result is, we have, we that's, for example, $300 I can spend on capital or for something that we really
exactly.
want. So,
Right.
it sounds goofy, but even those little decisions make all the difference in the world, to the organization. So, yeah,
What do they say? A thousand here, a thousand there. Pretty soon you're talking about real money.
that's right. And but again, it's interesting because we're never cheap, and Dave will never, when we bought the station in Eau Claire, it wasn't, I need you to get this on the air and try to save some money with it. It's spend the money responsibly, but we want to do this right because we want to make a good impression, and we don't want to sign this thing on and promote it and then have it off the air or something. So
Right.
um So, we're buying the new transmitter, we're buying these codecs and all these, other things. And, you know, it's not a ton of money, but it's not nothing. And, it's again, it's that whole, we want the listener to turn on the radio and not hear, noise and out of phase audio and coverage issues and things like that. Because that's our money. So, there are places where we will skimp a little bit when we'll try to cut some corners, and then there are places where that's not negotiable. And
Right.
our on-air product is one of those.
Yep. And it's really the whole conversation that we're having here comes back to engineering as a as an investment versus engineering as a cost, and showing the value of engineering in helping to operate the facilities.
And that's our job. I mean, that's what we have to impress, because I've worked for managers who, their opinion is if they see me coming down the hall, they're spending some money, they're going to have a bad day. And you kind of have to rise above that and become a partner in understanding goals. And sometimes that means, yeah, I really thought we needed to do this, but now it's not the right time. And talking to Dave or whatever, he's convinced me that my thinking may not be right on this, and that, I need to let that go. Because he'll say, yeah, and I'll go, okay, you're right. Now that I've heard your side of this, it probably isn't a wise decision right now. So
Right.
you really have to be collaborative, and you have to, um, there's education that goes both ways. But yeah, you really have to kind of rise above the I'm here to spend your money. And
Yep.
part of that is by being honest and saying, in some cases, you know, we've gotten the relationship now with Dave where I'll say we have to spend the money and he believes it. I'm not messing around.
Right. And a lot of it, as we were saying before, comes back to understanding the why, both the why you want to spend it and the why I mean, obviously the why he doesn't is, to some extent, yeah, it's obvious, but there may be other things that you're not aware of. Like, yeah, we're not doing this because we're planning on doing this and that will impact this, in which case we'll do this over here. So,
Right. Oh,
like you say, having the big picture makes a difference.
right. And not everybody can be in an envious position like I am, where you work directly and very closely with the owner of the group. But even when I was working for the big behemoth of Intercom, I got a lot done by working with the general managers that way. I really made them part of this situation, and I wasn't just some weird guy in a holding a soldering iron in a back room. I came in and I tried to find out what was important, and I'd lay out these scenarios and let them
Right.
come to that conclusion and go, here's the situation, as I know it. Here, if we continue going this way, this is what's going to happen. And if that's okay with you, then that's the way
We're
it is. But here's what I would recommend we do. And
right.
here's why I recommend it. And they then become part of that situation and they learn something. And a lot of times
Right.
I find that makes all the difference in the world.
And I think the big challenge, and I mean, I've learned this more and more. Actually, I've probably learned it more in sales than I ever did doing engineering stuff. Was that you've got to not take this stuff personally either. I mean, they're not, saying no to you as a person. They're saying no to the idea for whatever reason. And then, like you say, maybe it's just a matter of figuring out the why.
And that is hard because, we're all passionate people, and I'm very passionate about what I do. And so, and again, Dave and I've gotten into some heated discussions. And, one of the things I love about him is, he calls it the sliver theory, which is, if we don't pull the sliver out, whenever we have one of these big blowouts, we then talk it through and we pull the sliver out, and we're good from there on. But, you know, we all tend to get defensive sometimes, and I do too. And
Yep.
I'll go like, "Why are you questioning my decision? Do you know who you're talking to?"
Yeah.
Kind of thing. And I'll be honest, it happens sometimes. What?
Hmm.
Who are you to tell me no? I mean, I know this more than you. So
Yep. Yep.
it does require, you know, taking a step back, taking a deep breath, and understanding that there's more to this than your point. And what I like to do is I like to give them all the information they need, and it's ultimately his decision.
Yep.
He signs the checks. So I may be passionate that he needs to do something, and I'll lay it out. But I will say it's like, here's what I believe is gonna happen if we don't do this. Now, if you don't want to, that's fine. I'm just laying this out so that you know.
Right.
And he trusts my judgment on that stuff. But I've done that with contract work too, where I've said, you cannot spend the money. Here's what I think is going to happen if you don't.
Yeah.
Um,
And
and and that's
a
fine.
lot of it, yeah, a lot of it comes back to, and the analogy I typically use, especially if I'm talking to somebody that doesn't speak engineering as a first language, is I use the oil change analogy. You own a car, do you get the oil changed? If Why not? Or if what would happen if you don't? Well, we need to do an oil change at the transmitter site or whatever. So,
It's the line I like to use is, we make it look easy. I mean, nobody knows what we do until we no longer do it in this
yeah,
business. It's, well, things are working great. Well, there's a reason why they're working great. If I wasn't doing what I was doing, they wouldn't be working great.
right.
So, that's always the hardest part. But kind of getting back to the heart of the discussion, it's there are so many variables in deciding when to repair versus replace that it's a decision that you need to consciously make, and you need to spend some time making that decision. Now, if it's $100 part, no big deal. But if
Right.
we're talking about a couple $1,000s, uh, you know, you really owe it to yourself and to everybody to do your research, take your time, and really do those cost analysis. And you'll find that the answer becomes pretty easy. I mean, if you're struggling on should you repair or replace, you're just not there yet.
Right.
Once you sit there and you do that analysis, it should become pretty clear pretty quickly what the right decision is. And at
Yeah.
that point, it should be pretty easy to explain that to other people as well.
I had a guy call me not long ago from an insurance company, engineering contractor, and we get those calls a lot where they'll say, okay, we've got this customer and they've had this failure, and it'll cost this much to fix. And I said, now, will it cost that much to fix, or will it cost that much to get to the point where you find out if anything else has failed? Because the two are not necessarily the same. So, yeah, that's definitely, if you get to $1,000 and the product is a new one is $5,000, you're 20% of the way to the new product.
Right.
And you may or may not even know if that's going to solve the problem. And like you said, it may be solved for the next 6 months.
Right. And that's, yeah, it's, I had, and you were involved this a few years ago, and I replaced an lamb transmitter up near Fond du Lac, and the owner kept having me repair this older transmitter. And by the time I've repaired it 3 or 4 times, he bought, it was the price of a new one.
Hmm.
Um, and that's what I says. I can keep repairing this. How many times do you want to do that before you say, I've bought 3 transmitters now.
Right.
So that's what I'm saying is, when you get into that, and you said it really well, if you don't even understand what the failure is yet, that also has to factor in. If you say, well, I think this will fix it, what if it doesn't? What's the worst case scenario, and what would that cost? And does that factor in? As
Yep.
you mentioned, $1,000 repair on a $5,000 gadget, that's a hard one because it depends. There's a lot of factors there, but that is a tough one because what if that isn't it? And I think
Hmm.
about that all the time as a manager when
Right.
I'm looking at these things. It's like, well, what if that's not it? And I had that with a transitor recently where we just kept, we'd fix one thing and find something else.
Hmm.
And we did. We finally got to the point. Well, here's an even better example, a recent one that, Dave and I will take the hit for. We have a translator down near Madison, and we put the antenna up in the air and got everything connected, and it didn't work. We just had the just complete reflected power. Then it would go away, and it would come back, and we replaced everything except for the antenna. Guess what? It was the antenna. And
Yeah.
had we just bought a new antenna right out of the gate, it would have been way less than what we spent trying to figure this out.
Hmm.
So, and Dave and I had that talk, and it's like, well, listen, next time it's just, we go for the low hanging fruit, and, where do you cut your losses? I mean, after the second try at this, we should have said, let's just replace it, and stop trying to figure this out. And we have a bunch of transmitters too. So that absolutely factors in.
Oh yeah, and I mean, I had a situation with a guy. He called me and he goes, "Okay, so we had an engineer in and he TDR'd and he found the fault and it's at this many feet." And I said, "That's where your antenna is." Well, we're going to replace the line because that's a lot cheaper. And it's like
Yeah.
not a lot cheaper if it doesn't solve the problem. But so yeah, it's and that comes back to communications, and that's again the whole almost our whole session has been about communicating and talking this stuff out. And ultimately, like I say, the goal is more time for naps. Randy Kerbawi sent this picture, and it's of course a Nautel hat that the cat's sleeping on, which makes it super awesome. Oh, hey, look, folks, you remember that maintenance or the introduction slide that I said I'd blown out? I didn't blow it out. There it is. But oh, you got one of the cool new hats.
Oh yeah.
Oh yeah, did I give you that?
Well, I'm sure you did. I don't know who else would have given it to me.
But yeah, so there you go. If you got questions, feel free to ask them. I'm going to hit the close and out section mainly because, well, my coffee's empty and that needs to be dealt with. But this webinar, as with all of our webinars, is archived or will be archived. I hope it'll be archived. This will depend a lot on how badly I screwed up when I hit the start button because Ed was having technical difficulties. So we'll see. Hopefully it'll be archived. We do have the Waves newsletter on occasion. Of course, the YouTube channel. I started to type the note and didn't finish it, hence no closed parentheses. But if you get the moment, give a shout out to Marcus O'Rourke, SoCal broadcast engineer. He does these cool little short, like 2-3 minute YouTube videos that are very subject oriented with respect to broadcast engineering, and it's kind of cool like that. So
Yeah, those are
then
great.
yeah, and we'd mentioned the beat. Oh, by the way, Marcus also is the 2022 SBE Woman Educator of the Year Award winner too. So that was way cool. BDR.net and then the broadcast engineering .info. That's that's the one that you started.
Hmm.
So
Yeah,
and
15 years ago almost.
yeah, and it's a really good one because it's pretty extensively moderated to keep the fluff down. So the conversations tend to stay pretty much on topic, and it's really cool like that. You may
Um,
find somebody that looks like me loafing around there on the rare occasion, but I try to be the silent guy. It's as rare as it is for me. Um,
and also, if anybody has any questions about anything I've talked about, or wants to get some opinions on something, or whatever, I can be reached at chris@tarr.cc.
so there you go. CHRIS@TARR.cc.
Yep.
Um, And so on that note, I want to thank you very much, Mr. Tarr, for spending, holy smokes, been an hour and a half and change of your day here. So I really do appreciate it because you got how many stations now?
I have 25 full power stations and another 15 translators.
So the way I do math, that's 40.
Yeah.
That's all my fingers 4 times. But thanks very much for your time today. It's greatly appreciated.
Oh, you're welcome. I enjoyed being here.
And folks, I want to thank you all very much for spending an hour and change of your day with us. And hopefully we'll see you again next week. Next week, we are talking about, I think the subject line in the promo is winterizing. We're going to talk about seasonal maintenance. So try to include some stuff that applies to the folks that don't necessarily live in snow country like Chris and I do. But absolutely, tune in next week. We'll see you then. Thank you all. Have a great day. Bye now.